Brother's got a gameplay for you today. I think I'm going to be rocking the dollar defense. Loving the dollar defense right now. I think it's the best defense in the game. And then on offense, I think I'm in Eagles playbook. I really think Eagles is probably the best playbook this year. If you guys want any of my full offensive or defensive ebooks, those will be available by joining our school community. And that is going to be linked in the description down below. $10 gets you access to everything that I know about Madden, college football, all of my offensive, defensive ebooks, updates, route combos, coverage shells, everything you need to take your game to the next level. So if you want to check that out, again, that'll be linked in the description. Starting off, going to go auto flip off, auto limb on base, option defense on conservative, hook curls on 5. And what I like to do, just to kind of start the game, is basically just start in a basic cover 4 quarters style defense. I'm going to try to switch stick a little bit, and we'll see how this goes. I wanted to talk in this video a little bit about switch stick in general and kind of some of the big takeaways from the Madden 25 season. Madden 25 really was a big step in kind of a different direction that EA has decided to go into. I don't know if it's good, bad, whatever. It is what it is. There's the 3-man disengage. That is good for the game, in my opinion. And that sets us up with a long yardage situation where we are going to go to the, what I like to do in these 3rd and 19 situations, go ahead and throw this on about 15, throw that on 30, and then I am going to utilize this Tampa 2. Really like this defense for obvious passing situations. I do think it's really good in those situations. But anyway, back to what I was kind of saying there is we're going to get dotted. And if he hurries up, you call timeout here. Perfect. Switch stick really changed the game, and it changed the game in a lot of different ways. I actually think we will not feel the full effect of what switch stick has done to Madden for a while. Even though that, I think that we have kind of seen where this is going, and there we go. There's our stop. The main place that this is truly going, in my opinion, is it completely changed passing and it completely changed adjustments, and really changed coverage shells, but it also changed blitzes. Because really, I think a coverage-based defense is really effective because switch stick is so powerful. You don't want to give up those easy throwing lanes. You want to make them have to kind of throw the ball in some of those harder windows of the field. And so that's why you see so much cover 4 in this game. Now, that being said, I also wanted to talk a little bit about where I see this going forward, and kind of just the future of Madden. Obviously, I care a lot about Madden. I've been doing YouTube for a really long time. I think I've been doing YouTube for almost 13 years. I think it's my 13th year doing it, maybe 12. I started in Madden 2000 and kind of the back end of 11, and really Madden 12 was kind of my main Madden in terms of content that I started doing content. And yeah, the game's changed a lot, but really the biggest thing is with switch stick now, you're able to defend a lot more. You're able to defend a lot more, and most importantly, you're able to defend kind of the big play a lot more than you have been in the past. In previous Maddens, you could have like a corner route that got over a zone drop, and if it wasn't usered, then the corner route would just basically, you would never ever be able to stop a corner route. Now with switch stick, you just basically can switch stick to the corner, and then you can switch stick back to the in route, and then you can switch stick back to the deep post route, right? You can switch stick multiple routes per play, every single play. And so really the game, as far as like how did the game change, defense became significantly more simple in terms of kind of what you want to do. You want to base out of coverage shells that you can kind of like adapt. You want to be able to switch stick around within the coverage shell. So typically that means you're going to want to run a little bit more of a simple coverage shell. Cross-man defenses pretty much largely aren't as effective as they used to be. And so that just kind of changed everything in terms of just how the game is played at the highest level. And so, what does the future hold? And kind of also, I think it actually follows semi-realistic pattern that we're seeing in the NFL right now, for example, and that is just this basic pattern of not giving up big plays, forcing your opponent to work, and we'll continue this conversation in game number 2. So the game is all about like giving up, not giving up the big play, and then kind of making the opponent work. I talked a little bit about it before, but it's this idea essentially of taking away the layup throws, and then taking away the 3-pointers and forcing people to beat you in the intermediate area of the field, because that is the hardest area of the field to consistently attack a defense. And so that's essentially, if you think about cover 4 drop, especially shaded down cover 4, is kind of what that defense is. If you think about that defense, it really does a good job, especially the cover four drop version. Does a really good job of taking away the big plays. There's not a lot of combos in this game that are going to one play touchdown, a cover four drop. There's also simultaneously, especially with switch stick being so popular, you could switch stick any bomb, and bombs take a significant amount of time to develop. So not only do you have to have time in the pocket, but you have to have time now with the switch stick feature. You have to have time for the defense not to react to what you're doing, and so those are like massive, massive components in terms of what makes cover four really the meta and why it's such a good coverage in this year's game, and why I do believe that it's going to be probably the best coverage for a while. If you just think about it practically, cover four is kind of the main coverage that you see in the NFL. Oh, I was trying to throw that RPO. It's kind of the main coverage that you're starting to see in the NFL for a variety of different reasons, but really the main reason is just for its, I guess, adaptability of the coverage. The beauty of if you have a good cover four based defense, especially with switch stick, it's going to play more like a match defense because you're going to be switching onto kind of the weaknesses of the zone coverage itself. So you're switch sticking to kind of cover up for the weaknesses within the coverage, and it makes it kind of play a little bit more like a traditional match type concept, man matching, zone matching. You're basically, if you think about it, you're switch sticking onto a zone, and then you're matching, kind of the defense or the routes within it. So it's a big, big piece of the game going forward, and it really just kind of comes back to this discussion of like, what do you see the future of Madden being, and how do you see the game changing year over year? And there's a couple ways in which the game changes. What I'm kind of curious to think of is really, if you think about it, most of the game centers around a blitz meta, right? What's the blitz? What's the blitz concept? What's the best blitz concept in the game? This year's game, though, I will say, until this disengage or engage blitz was really made popular at $1, I would say Dollar's defense all year long, while it has had good blitzes, I wouldn't say Dollar has had like the fastest pressure or even the best pressure. But what Dollar has had is it's had good pressure, and then it's also had a switch stick, like a defense that is very capable of switch stick. And I think that is the biggest like key to defense, is like having this defense that's able to make easy switch sticks out of, which is why I think cover four ultimately is going to be good for a long time. I think in general, just two high safeties looks. One of the things I've been thinking about is how would a cover three look in this year's game if it was a cover three, and really it's just a matter of switch sticking onto the hook curl defenders. I think in every defense, cover three, cover four, cover two, honestly can now be ran because you can switch stick to cover up the weaknesses. Great read. You can switch stick to cover up the weaknesses of every single coverage. So a lot of it comes down to knowing, in my opinion, your coverage's weakness. Whatever the defense is that you're utilizing, what is the weakness within the coverage that you have is a super big thing to understand. So in Tampa 2, the weakness is the deep middle of the field. In cover 4, really the biggest weakness in a cover 4 defense, in my opinion, is kind of the deep outside, like corner routes, basically like speed outs, sideline routes, deep outside patterns. Cover 3, really it's the seam streaks. It's not necessarily the deep middle, but it's the seam area of the field that you can kind of get burned on within a cover 2 based defense. There we go, or a cover 3 based defense. And then Crossman, if you think about, and he's going to be out here early as well, man. We're just rolling right through these games today. And then the thing that I was going to say about like cover 0 based coverages, or really just even more like crossman defenses, those are defenses that I think you're going to see a lot more situationally, a lot more as a mix-up, as opposed to being kind of the mainstay defensive philosophy. Although man coverage low-key is actually pretty good in this year's game, primarily just because so many people run zone, and so many people, specifically like shaded down man coverage is pretty good in this year's game. But the idea of like manning up a specific player or any of that stuff has really kind of gone away. And the main reason why I think that it's gone away is because you can't, I'm trying to think of the right word would be, like you can't switch stick onto that player and adapt that. So that player is relatively, it's not entirely useless, but it kind of at its core just becomes it's just less effective because you can't really like the problem is if that let's say that receiver that they're manned up to is just a pull route or just a basic flat or something underneath, then having that player manned up is effectively kind of under not really valuable. So anyway, I just think in general like defense. What I like about what Switchstick has offered the game defensively is defense for the first time in a while. Not only feels like it got improved because of Switchstick, but it also like has an ability to adjust to what the offense is doing beyond just trying to guess right? Because it's now the structure. What Switchstick really does is it allows the structure of the defense itself to adapt to the routes on the field. And here's the kicker. That's what match coverage is supposed to do in real life. That's what match coverage does in real life. But they have not been able to code that within the defensive system within the game properly. And so match coverage itself has kind of just essentially just been a very, easy to bomb kind of bad coverage defense in general. So all of that explanation to say, I personally think that we are kind of in an era of Madden with Switchstick where a lot of different coverages can honestly work. And defense now kind of becomes a lot more about knowing your vulnerabilities and a lot more about adjusting within the structure of the coverage itself to the weaknesses of the coverage more so than having like a pre-snap, oh, I think you're going to run this, so I do this. And I think that is it's a big change for sure. And I don't know, like it's a big change. And I don't really know exactly what's going to come of it other than what we've seen this year. And what we've seen this year is I do think it provides a lot more exciting gameplay. In terms of you're gonna switch stick and get an alert. It provides just a lot more user skill within the game that I think is underrated. I think is really good for the game. There's a lot more user skill. I think there also the other big piece of it is now there's this trying to think how to word it like now there's this massive emphasis offensively on building route combos that manipulate the switch stick. That is another big piece of the game. And that is something that I feel like in my last month or so have really finally started to get a semi-decent grasp on why I was struggling so much against Switchstick until I started doing this. And that basic philosophy is understanding read progressions offensively and how to space your routes a lot differently. Your spacing has to be a lot better. But also, and I think this is a super underrated point that I'm about to make, your post-snap reads need to be a lot better. This is something that I feel like was super important for me to develop and probably is going to be important for you to develop. It's a lot more if this, then that. Of course, I say that I throw a pick, even though my corner route had outside leverage and I thought was going to win. It's a lot more if this and that, knowing your read progressions, anticipating. And there's this thing that I've been, a quote that I've been thinking about. I actually put on Twitter, put on X. If you don't follow me on X, that'll be linked in the description, boys. But it's this thing that I've been thinking about, and that's this. It's a quote from Tom Landry. And Mr. Tom Landry said in a deal a long time ago. I don't know exactly how long ago, but he said anticipation beats reaction. And so the game itself, anticipation beats reaction every single time. The game itself becomes a lot more about reaction. It becomes a lot more about, it already was a little bit, or it becomes a lot more about anticipation. It already was a little bit about anticipation in terms of I'm trying to anticipate what the play call is. But now there's this significant amount of ability to be right even when you're wrong because of switch stick that it becomes more, I'm trying to anticipate your routes, or I'm trying to anticipate your plays within my switch stick itself, as opposed to the adjustments. It used to be, I was basically trying to guess your play call, and then I was trying to adjust perfectly to the play call. Now, it's really more so, I'm trying to anticipate your play call. and if you call this, I would switch stick this way, but if you call this other thing, I'll switch stick that way, and that is the if this and that of the game. And I just feel like honestly, in a lot of ways, the game it became simpler and simultaneously became harder. I don't know if that's what y'all are thinking, but it's kind of how I feel. I feel like this has been a fairly simple game, but I would say it's definitely harder this year, in my opinion, than it's ever been because of there's definitely a more I think the best word would probably be there's a more significant skill gap because of switch stick, and it takes a little bit of time. And actually, what I think is even more so is it takes a little bit of critical thinking within your like execution of the play itself. Like it takes some critical thinking while you're trying to execute to truly, I guess, manipulate a switch stick in a way that's going to be advantageous to you on both sides of the ball. So that's long-winded explanation to, kind of the original thing that I wanted to touch on, which is just basically, how is switch stick changing Madden, not just this year, but going forward. I think these are some of the ways in which it just significantly changes the game. But ironically, I'm playing this guy that's running cover zero every play, and so that is still, fairly straightforward to play. Let's see if I can just hit this. See if Bo Nix can hit this throw. Get a nice dot, yes sir. These combine cards definitely solid. But yeah, I feel like that's kind of what I've been trying to put words to for a while is switch stick has changed the game in a lot of ways. The main way, I think, being you have to be fast. It's sped, like in a way, it sped the game up significantly. And so being late on a read is very much like a switch stick type. Like you're going to be, if you're late on a read, you're going to pay for it. And if you switch stick late, you're going to pay for it. But if you're on time, then it's a significant advantage to you. So those are some of the different things, some of the different ways in which switch stick has truly changed the game. This guy's literally going to run cover zero every play. So I don't know why we're making the game hard on ourselves. Now, the biggest thing that I think you have to address is the way switch stick has impacted like the best offenses in the world. And I think the biggest thing is if you watch like John Beast, I would consider John Beast. Primarily John. I would consider John to be, if not the best offensive player in the world, probably right there, top 5 every year. I mean, he's just consistently one of the best offenses in the world that you're going to play. And when you watch John play offense, and when you watch, Fancy, who I would say probably has the best defense this year, when you watch these guys play the game, one of the things you'll notice is the lack, and this is the interesting thing, the lack of super deep down the field passing. So what you used to be able to do, especially on next gen, is you used to be able to throw, pretty much every play you would throw for over 10 yards, right? It was rare when a pass was caught underneath. And I think one of the biggest ways that switch stick has changed the game is because you can switch stick and really close off some of those deep down the field throwing lanes, you're not seeing as many massive plays. What you're seeing, though, and this is what's, I think, interesting, kind of more so like an NFL situation, you're seeing a lot tighter throwing windows, but you're also seeing, because of how switch stick works, meaning it's like you're pretty much using like everything on the field, you're seeing more busted coverages. So kind of like in the NFL, match coverage gets busted and the player is just, wide open. That I feel like is more of what you're seeing. You're not seeing, what you used to see was just more like, oh, I had a cover 3 bomb called on this play and you called cover 3. Now it's like, oh, I had a streak and you switched it onto the quarter and tried to alert my post, so my streak was open now. It's like you're catching, it's more like you're catching them, kind of like basically basically making a user error as opposed to the coverage itself being broken, which is kind of interesting to think about. That switch stick has kind of changed the game in that category. Because then, and if you look at who had the best offense in this year's game, I was going to say this too. So the player that really, it's a game that we'll never see because thanks to the quad box, which I've talked about why I absolutely despise the quad box, but it's a game that we'll probably never see because of that. It was the Fancy versus Clef Zero Chill game. Now you see some clips of that on EA's Red Zone stream, but you don't see the whole game. I watched the whole game live, but I wasn't able to really do. I don't think I did a film room on it. I wish I would have because it's the game that I keep thinking about because it's the first game in the MCS that I saw where Fancy consistently really couldn't, like, was struggling to get a stop. I think he got one stop, maybe two stops. Pretty much every other game we've seen Fancy play defensively, he's gotten multiple stops. It was also a game in which Clef was able to stop him, but Clef basically beat him. I want to say it was like 33 to 14. I don't know. It was a big win for Clef. And obviously Clef ends up winning 0. Great read by him. That's bad defense by me. Clef ends up winning 0 chill, right? And wins his first belt. And then Clef plays TJ, and I think he might have gotten held to 3 one time, but pretty much moved the ball at will the entire game in that one as well. And it just got me thinking because Clef was running bunch and most people left bunch in this year's game. Really, what made Clef's offense so consistently effective? And it's not just those couple games. If you look at like the Velas game, Clef was hard to stop offensively as well. Like, I just felt like Clef probably had one of the better offenses this year, and it was really a combination of two things. Number one, Clef had a significant quick hike component within his offense. But what's really interesting is Clef pretty much largely stayed in one formation the majority of the game. I believe he was in bunch offset majority of the game that he played, or the games that he played in the tournaments this year. So he was in bunch offset. And then the other thing that made it unique, and this was the only other thing that I thought was really, really significant, Clef, his main focus, and he said this in his interviews, he said this all over different areas in different ways, that his offense is good because he's not trying to go for the big play. It's this idea of like he's trying to basically just consistently take good shed by him, consistently take what the defense gives him. Now, that sounds like a very simple thing to do, but if you think about offenses, in the NFL, that's kind of, if you look at the best offenses in the world, it's kind of what it ultimately arrives into, is that if the defense is consistently taking away the deep throw, the underneath throw, right? And again, I know it sounds, super complicated to figure that out, right? But truly, this is such a big deal because so many teams don't, right? So many teams don't take the underneath. They don't take the easy reads. They try to force the ball downfield, and what happens? They throw interceptions. And I feel like that happened so much in this year's game, and if you're going to be effective at passing in the future, you're going to have a little bit more of an emphasis, I believe, as Cover 2 Man just bagged my life away there, on the underneath passing aspect of the game. 100% believe that is going to be critical going forward because you're going to have to, what Clef was able to do within his games is if you take a look at it, and it all leads into this little deal I was thinking about with kind of the top 10 defenses as well. One of the things that Clef was able to do was, because he was taking the underneath, he was able to open up the deep passing game as a result. Essentially, he would catch you in a underneath coverage, like a cover 2 hard flat or some kind of super unaggressive underneath coverage. But the over top was wide open. It was impossible to switch stick it because it was, the whole, everything was open up top. And so it's this idea of using the short underneath passing game to set up the deeper play because the defensive player is, basically going to try to get over aggressive. Now, what I believe the key for defense is to not get over aggressive, actually, and to basically just stay balanced within what you're trying to do. However, I get there, please, Herb, please. There you go. So anyway, that's like it's like kind of the back and forth chess match of those two things. That being said, we talk about top level defenses of all time. If you think about it, most of the defenses that are top level defenses in the NFL were fairly simple, right? You think about the Legion of Boom, Seattle cover three. It was, basically cover three, Buzz, Mabel, pretty much every single play, variations of cover three. You think about the Tampa Bay Buccaneers of the 2000s, and that was a defense that was able to, basically counter the greatest show on turf, which is one of the best offenses ever. You look at what they were able to do, and it was primarily a fairly simple defense that really just focused, again, and this is the key, it focused on limiting the big play, and it forced you to have to work up and down the field. It forced you to have to take the underneath, and then, basically if you're not going to be patient, you have to take the underneath while under pressure. And so, anyway, those are all little factors. If you look at every great defense of all time, it pretty much follows that pattern. There's some nuance to that, like the Giants defense that stymied Tom Brady in 2007. That defense, for the most part, was actually fairly simple, but it was led by Steve Spagnuolo, and obviously we know that he can get a little complex within how he's going to try to do things. But that was really Spag's defense is more about essentially just trying to keep the pre-snap picture the same and change the post-snap picture. You look at what Vic Fangio's defense just did in the Super Bowl. Very simple defense, pretty much ran the same coverage majority of the game, and it just, at the end of the day, that was more of a pass rush deal being so good. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is best defenses in the real NFL are very simple to run normally, and what they mainly focus on is taking advantage of an offense kind of getting overzealous, right? Keeping the offense in front, making them, work for it, especially if you can stop the run. If you can stop the run, then it's all about closing off different throwing lanes within different types of coverages, whether it's cover 3, cover 4, cover 2, or match. So, that being said, I think switch stick, what it really core, if you look at the routes that switch stick ultimately defends, it's things like post routes, cross routes, corner routes, one-play touchdowns, some of those deeper routes. Switch stick really has a difficult, if you think about it, it has a fairly difficult time defending quick hitting routes because it's hard to switch stick fast enough to the route unless obviously you're anticipating the player, you're kind of sitting on it. It's really hard to kind of switch stick everything fast. I mean, you see like stick right there, like it's a super hard switch stick for me to be able to make to that stick route because it's hitting so quickly, right? So it's just different things like that that I think are going to be critical. I think the underneath passing game in general is going to be key in the long run of Madden 26 or future games. Just this idea of trying to essentially open up the underneath, right? It's a very basic thing, but we're literally seeing this be played out at every single level of comp Madden and the NFL. This basic idea of, keep the offense in front of you, then but don't break, change the picture post snap a little bit, and then basically use the offense's impatience against them. So anyway, those are some different things that I'm thinking about. Just in terms of how switch stick truly has affected the game. I think it's changed the game in a lot of ways. And I think it's going to continue to change the game, especially if you're able to only send 3 or 4. Because if you only have to send 3 or 4 to get a decent level of pressure, what that opens up for you defensively is the ability to have a lot more integrity within your coverages that keep the lid on. It's that too high safety deal, that Vic Fangio idea. What's interesting is Vic Fangio actually plays quite a bit of cover 3 in his core structure as well. The thing that is also going to have to be discussed is just the idea of, which I do think actually matters, is this year's game was not very run-oriented. Like the run game just wasn't that good for most of the year. Next year, I don't know if that's going to be the case. I think you're gonna. I don't know. We'll just see. But if the run game's good, it really changes a little bit of how you have to play defense because you have to be able to stop the run more consistently. Which in the NFL, most NFL defenses are pretty much base structure is really zone drop or zone run fit based. Probably not a good idea that I'm doing that. He just really doesn't want to guard that flat. But I'm telling you, man, it's all about the 10 zones, man. It all comes back to the 10 zones of passing, which we've talked about before on the channel. It's just an idea of like if you were to look at the zones in the game, the hard flat, the vert hook, the 3-rec hook, the vert hook, the 3-rec hook. It's the idea of just stretching those zones horizontally and then simultaneously being able to take it vertical. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. If you guys want to take your game to the next level, check out my ebooks in our school community. That is going to be linked in the description down below.